All right, it looks like we've got everything going on Facebook as well. If you're joining us on Facebook, welcome. We're so glad to have you as part of our webinar today. And if you've just now joined us on Zoom, thank you for taking time to join us for today's webinar. We are going to get started here in just a moment. Just want to welcome you all. We're getting closed captioning situated. We've had some issues, but we're getting that situated and we will have closed captioning soon. All right, I do have that we are at 12:15, so we're going to go ahead and get started today. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on unlocking potential, understanding strength-based IEP goals, and the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance for your child's success. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin, and I am the Training and Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. We are funded through the Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs. Throughout Texas, we have 4 projects known as PACT, PATH, PIN, and TEAM. Our mission at Partners Resource Network is to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. Also joining me today from Partners Resource Network is our Director of Statewide Services, Christina Henning, our Support Specialist, Chelsea Rivas, and our Technology Specialist, Zach Hildago. If you're having any technical difficulties, please reach out to Zach in the chat box and he can assist you with those. For those of you that are needing a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, you will be receiving an email to thank you for attending the webinar. If you'll follow the link in that email, you can get your certificate of attendance. We will have a time for question and answers at the end of the presentation. If you're joining us on Zoom, please type your questions in the Q&A box. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comments. We are recording today's webinar and streaming it on Facebook. The recording will be available on our Facebook page as well as our website at prntexas.org. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our special guest presenter today, Dr. Jennifer Denham. Dr. Denham joined the College of Education and Social Sciences at West Texas A&M University in 2019 after working in special education for 11 years. She has a Bachelor of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies, a Master of Education in Curriculum and Instruction with the certification as a Reading Specialist, a Master of Education in Educational Diagnosticians, and a Doctorate of Education in Educational Leadership. Dr. Denham teaches classes on children with special needs, the science of teaching reading, and Texas Reading Academies. Dr. Denham also holds a national certification with the Academic Language Therapy Association as a Certified Academic Language Therapist, or CALT. She is a member of the Delta Kappa Gamma, Kappa Delta Phi, the Council for Exceptional Leaders, the International Literacy Association, the International Dyslexia Association, and the National Association of Special Education Teachers. Dr. Denham, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to stop sharing and let you share and turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to make sure I'm watching this. All right. Did I freeze or am I good?
You're good.
Okay. So first and foremost, let me get my slideshow going. Let's see. All right. So here we are. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I think we have a variety of different people that are here, some parents, some professionals. I'm a parent and my daughter is my why, and I'm also a teacher. That's why I became a teacher, is the struggles we had with dyslexia and making sure she got what she needed. So thank you for that wonderful introduction, Stephanie. Everybody at PRN has been great. Sorry, I just used an acronym after I said I wouldn't. At Partners Resource Network, thank you so much. You all have been wonderful. So today's agenda, I thought it would be good, highlight Partners Resource Network. In our world, we use lots of acronyms. In the PowerPoint, you will have the links in there, and if I've missed something, I know that we will have those resources for you. So I want to, again, thank you, Partners Resource Network. Also, Texas Education Agency. I don't want you to be afraid of their website or anything like that. And also hear about SpedTex. Hopefully you've heard about that, and if not, that's okay. We'll go into detail with some of those resources for you. And then also Texas Sped Support Technical Assistance. Those are great places for you to look at. I'll briefly go over the IEP, what that is, the Individual Education Program or Individual Education Plan. Also, that long word, that PLAAFP thing, what in the world? Present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. So, again, thank you. What is TEA? So I think I can assume most everybody knows, but when you assume, that's not always a good thing. Texas Education Agency is our state agency that guides us, whether we're teachers in public ed, in charter schools, in private schools, higher education. The Texas Education Agency gives us a lot of guidance from the State Board of Education. So what can you look at? So in this slide, this would take you to TEA, and you could go into academics, then special populations, and then special education. And each one of these you can click on, and I didn't make it this way in this PowerPoint, but you would click on special education. That's where we're going to focus. But let's say you have a child with dyslexia. What does that mean? Or maybe you have a gifted student, a child that you want to find out what is Texas doing. So I wanted to be sure to show you what that would look like. And we're, again, going to focus in this tab where it says special education. So what's in there? Things like the strategic plan. What does that mean? That's kind of strange sounding. If you're a parent, now if you work for schools, you've heard some of this terminology, or you work with schools. How to stay informed, and what can you do to look at the different things that are going on. So notice there's regional supports. Up here in the Texas Panhandle, we have Region 16 and Region 17. There's 20 some odd service centers throughout the state of Texas. So you can look at those to help you find additional resources. Maybe you want to have some more training or find someone that has some specialties, like Region 10 is one of the big ones for dyslexia. And there's also the state of Texas has special education guidance, and you can look through that as well. If you hear that word data and reports and testing and assessment, don't be afraid of those. That's how we are able to gauge with what's going on with your student. So SpedTex, what is that? That is one of the websites and groups that helps us learn about what is going on in all the world of special education in Texas. So this is their logo that they have on their website. And again, if you were to click on this link, you would be able to see the website. So I should have put that up there so that could look a little bit better for you all. But did you know that there's a lot of resources for special education? Some of you may know that, and some of you, this may be totally new to you. So you may not understand, oh, there's a lot of resources. You can create an account with SpedTex. And there's lots of great resources for families. So both SpedTex and Texas Sped Support will help both educators and parents. When you get into the special guidance, there's great information in here. You could click on that box and it would take you to those resources for families. You can click on more information for families. And don't forget, they have a monthly newsletter, just like Partners Resource Network has webinars and newsletters, so does SpedTex. And that may help you understand what is going on now. There's lots of concern that's going on in the world of education, both in our state and nationally. So what is going on in our state? And that's one way to stay informed. Now, what is Texas Sped Support? This is what their logo looks like. And I couldn't say this any better myself. I just went and copied what Texas Sped Support and given them the credit. They put those in those words. It's technical assistance and how to walk you through those different pieces, like how do I develop an IEP? Am I supposed to develop an IEP? How do I know about severe cognitive disabilities and things like that? Maybe you're an administrator, maybe your support staff, a paraprofessional, and not too sure. Texas Sped Support is a great place to look up that information. And some of the information I'm using today comes from there. So some of the information I have has come from this guide. And in the PowerPoint gives you that website. It'll take you to this. It is a PDF document that you can work through. I wish I could remember how many pages. It's 30, 40 pages at least. Notice that when those that are tied to the Texas Education Agency, they will update some of these guidance documents. And so this one was updated in December of 23. We have not had a lot of changes with individual education programs, goals and objectives and the things that create those programs. Not a lot of changes, maybe some little things here and there, but this guidance document is up to date. So you want to check that when you're looking through there. In that technical assistance document, and it's particular to the IEP. So I'm going to say IEP from on out. Again, we're talking about the program developed for a particular student. It's individualized, it's for their education, both academic and functional, and it's everything that will help make that child successful in school. I like that it says that we need to set rigorous expectations. That R word that, it's we have lots of those, and we have campaigns to not use certain words that begin with R. Rigor is not anything to be afraid of. We want to push the bar a little bit with our students. We want to make sure that they're achieving at their best possible way. So it says rigorous expectations. Don't be afraid of that. Push the bar a little bit. As parents, we do push our children. All right, I know you've been reading for 30 minutes. Let's see if we can go 10 minutes more. That's something simple, but you're increasing that rigor with that student. So it's important to remember that the IEP is a written document. So it's a legal binding document, and it's completed by the ARD committee. In the state of Texas, we call it the ARD committee, which stands for Admission Review and Dismissal Committee. In other states, it may be called an IEP committee. So it's a group of people that come together to talk about a particular student. They are served under IDEA, and that is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And for those that don't know, in 2004, that's when it was reauthorized. So that is federal law for any child attending public school from ages 3 to 21. So again, that IEP is a written legal document. I didn't put legal in there, but it is a legal binding document. So it's important to remember that. And sometimes if you're a parent or an advocate, you might have to remind the professionals you're working with. So what does IDEA say? And I took this straight from the federal website, Department of Education, to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate, public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. That's a lot of words, but remember, there should not be any cost to parents or guardians for the children that are being served under IDEA. And special education is not a place. It's specially designed instruction. How are teachers going to teach that child with their disability, their way that they do things differently than some of their friends? So we want to remember that. On page 6 and 7 of that document, TEA has developed a model form and guidance for creating these IEPs. It's pretty good. I use it in my classes for our alternative certification program. We have future teachers or people in the classroom on intern certificates teaching children about IEPs. So it's important to know that's something we're preparing future educators about. That form is in compliance both with the state of Texas and with the federal government. So it's important to know all the different components of that meet state and federal guidelines and all the information that comes down from the federal government. The IEP, this is something huge to remember for all of us, and it's also a good revisit. The IEP is developed during the ARD committee meeting and must be held at an agreeable time for the parent to participate. So I'm going to say that again. The IEP, the individual education program, is developed during the ARD committee meeting. So as you are talking about goals and objectives, and we're going to talk about PLAAFP statements, that should be done during the meeting. So if you go in and you see, oh, they've scheduled everybody within 15 minutes, well, don't predetermine that time frame. If you need to take more time, take more time. That's your time with your student to be there, or as an advocate. Those are things that should be developed there. Now, I need to sidestep and say, it is very possible that teachers will come with pieces of drafts of the IEP. Maybe they can see they have the data to show what is and is not working in their classroom. So what works in one classroom may not work in another. Maybe audiobooks is something that's a great accommodation. And Learning Ally has a great program, and the Texas Education Agency supports that. I believe there's a grant that brings that all together. So any student with a reading difficulty should be eligible to have access to Learning Ally. That's one good example, and there's many more. But know that those things have to come together and are written in that ARD committee. And I already touched on the next one. Next two, best practice is to write draft. So as a special education teacher, that's something I would take to the meeting. I would try and have meetings with parents beforehand and have discussions with them. And that's always good to do. As a parent, you might have some questions. Okay, well, I keep seeing this information coming home and it's kind of confusing to me. I don't understand it. Well, that's a good time for the two of you to talk about some different things. Or maybe there's a couple of teachers that are there. Again, if they bring pieces to the ARD committee, that's okay. It really should say draft on it. We don't want to predetermine what is happening with your child. You've got to have some input as well, and the student needs to have input as well. So I like to point those things out. It's very, very important. Now, as you look through this document, and I encourage you after this webinar to go and take a look. You don't have to print it out, but if you're like me, I like some paper, I like to make some notes, just print parts of it. On page 7 of the IEP development part of this guidance, those IEPs have to be reviewed at least annually, okay? So know that you have to have a meeting every year. And I think Probably a lot of people that are in this webinar know that. So maybe people that are going to watch this webinar later may not know that. Again, the IEP, the individual education program, has to be reviewed annually at the bare minimum. If parents want to meet more often, or if teachers or schools need to or want to, they can. It can be revised. Okay. It's a legal document. It's written, but it can also be revised. So don't forget about that. It's important to know that frequent progress monitoring and data collection is very important to see what kind of growth the student is making. What kind of progress are they making with our IEP goals and objectives? I'm going to jump through that guidance document a little bit farther. There's lots of great graphics in there as well. It's not too wordy, so it's pretty easy to see. And some of you may be very familiar with this document. On pages 18 and 19, IEPs must be observable. You've got to be able to watch and see how a student is doing certain tasks, and it has to be measurable. So those critical components you need to watch for. Those of us that teach future teachers, we want to make sure not only our special education teachers, but our general education teachers need to know these components of an IEP goal. If it doesn't contain these, it's probably not the best written IEP, and I would question it, no matter who you are in the ARD meeting. Time frame. What kind of time frame are we using? You know, is this going to be just over a course of 6 weeks? Is this going to be over a course of a year? What is that time frame we're looking at this goal, whether it's academic or functional? What kind of conditions? Are we going to provide anything for the student to help them? Maybe they are reading, but they're also using audiobooks as they're reading to help them stay on track and be a little bit more fluent. Maybe they're using graphic organizers to help collect their thoughts. So when they write, they are on track with it. What kind of behavior? What are we going to have them do? Are they going to write? Are they going to calculate? And what other criteria do we need with that? So it's important to know we have to have IEP goals that are observable and measurable, and it should contain these 4 components. I'd question it if they don't. And I'm not sure if I put a sample one in here. I don't think I did. Going back to page 11 in this document, it's important to know that a child needs to be identified as needing specialized education and or related services. Maybe a student just needs to have speech related services, not necessarily specialized education. So it's okay if they are receiving only speech classes. And so a speech language pathologist or a speech language pathologist assistant is coming in working with that student. But we have to identify that the need is there. That child is evaluated by qualified assessment personnel. In the state of Texas, we have educational diagnosticians, but we also have licensed school psychologists. And I know there's been a little bit of a name change to that certification, but educational diagnosticians are typically in the South, in Texas, but there are some outside of the state. In other parts of the United States, students, graduate students go through a program to become a licensed school psychologist. That also, having that kind of assessment certification also ensures they've studied a lot and they understand assessment and they know how to build the relationship with students to be able to get the best out of them when they're evaluating them. So just know there's certain qualifications. You can't just have somebody without a degree or without a master's degree. So when you're looking at assessment people, they have a lot of good qualifications. And it's okay to check on that and question that. Where did you go to school? Where did you do these things? The ARD committee determines whether the, let me say this again. The ARD committee determined that the child is eligible and meets eligibility requirements for services. So together as the committee, you determine, yes, this student meets all the criteria outlined in federal and state guidelines and meets those requirements. Remember, there's 13 categories, 13 disability categories that a student can be eligible to receive services in specialized education. And the ARD committee develops the IEP and the services that are needed. That's why it's important to have teachers collect that data, what's working, what's not, when they come to these ARD meetings. Same with parents. Those of you that are parents, okay, this may be working at school, but we've tried to do these certain things and it's just not working. I'm not sure if we need to rethink some things. So that is good information for the school to know as well. So it's important to have that. All right, now the nitty gritty. Page 13 begins what we call a PLAAFP statement, or the statement is, it's not just one sentence, it's multiple sentences. Maybe it's multiple paragraphs, but the present level. So right now, what can the student do academically? Can they achieve reading? Can they achieve in math? And also their functional performance. Some of our students may struggle with a physical impairment, and maybe they need some help from an orientation mobility specialist in how to move about in certain areas, maybe how to walk down the hallway. So we look at all of that. We need to know, what can the student do now, both academically and functionally, and where do they need some additional help? I always like to start with the positive. What can they do? They can do great things. So what is this thing that she's talking about that has this funny acronym? Well, it is a statement that provides how the child's disability affects their progress in school. It affects how they learn the TEKS. Now, the TEKS are the Texas Essential of Knowledge and Skills. That is what we are teaching. What components of phonics are we teaching? What components of reading are we teaching? Are we teaching cursive handwriting? You bet we are. In second grade, that's when we talk about and we show them how to write in cursive handwriting. So knowing those TEKS is important as well. That is available online in TEA's website. And there's great programs like TEKS Resource System and Lead Forward that can give teachers and parents all the basic information, little snapshots. And some of the language is academic language, but you get an idea, okay, when do they learn about this? When do they start doing these types of math things? When do they learn about this in science? Those TEKS tells you about that. So can the student effectively achieve what their non-disabled peers are achieving? We take a look at that. Page 13 of that document talks about more into what is this PLAAFP thing? What goes into it? And I always like to say that PLAAFP statement is what drives the IEP. I always say that. If you don't have a good solid foundation, you're not going to have a good solid IEP. I look back at some of the IEP goals that I wrote for some kiddos I served, and I'm like, what was I thinking? We could do so much better than that. But we need to have that data, and that's something that the Andrew case, and I'll talk more about that as we move along, talked about, and the Supreme Court even got involved and was looking at the PLAAFP and solid foundation for IEP goals. So you want to have baseline data. Let's say you have a student that was just evaluated and the teacher has some baseline data. Maybe they're doing some assessments on a computer, and then they're also meeting with the teacher and let's say it's reading. And so there's different assessments that the teachers, both informal and formal, they're collecting that data. We need to know, where is the student today as they are identified? Is it clear? What is the objective of the data to collect? And does it tell some of the story of what's going on with the child? But it's also important to remember, in these statements, we need to know what the child's strengths are. And it's always good to start with the positive. I like to point out positive things. As we coach teachers in the classroom, doing their clinical teaching, doing their internship, working through the Reading Academy, we point out what they're doing well with students. So do that to your children as well. What is the student doing well? What are they good at? Where do they need some additional help? Where are the gaps in learning? Okay, so that's additional information. And if you think about that, is that going to come from one source? Probably not. The sources are going to be from parents. Parents are so important. Parents and guardians. Who's taking care of it? Maybe grandma is taking care of a child more than mom and dad. Mom and dad have them, but they're working. So we want to collect that data. What's going well at home? Where do they see that there is a need? Also, we need to have some reasons how we identified those gaps and how that affects the learning and involvement in school. So let's say they're struggling with reading. They're not very fluent. They can't decode what the words are saying. And when they finally figure it out, their brains are working so hard, they forgot what they read. And so they're having some comprehension issues. Well, you take that into a science classroom. If they're struggling to read in reading class, they're going to struggle to read in science class. If they take that reading difficulty into social studies, they're going to struggle in there too. So we want to make sure that the reading is good and it's going to help them in all subject areas. We also need to know the reasons how the disability is affecting their learning in the general curriculum. And so when I say general curriculum, it's what they're teaching every day in the school. And what one school is doing may be different from another school. So some of that curriculum, you may or may not know, there's a lot of curriculum that the Texas Education Agency and the State Board of Education is looking at. So they're coming out with new curriculums. And maybe you've seen Eureka Math. Maybe you've seen, I'm trying to think of some of the other resources. Maybe Amplify. Maybe you've heard something about Bluebonnet. Get on TEA's website and look at that curriculum, because you want to know, I don't understand this. How am I going to help my child? And my child has, maybe they have dyscalculia, which is a specific learning disability, and they struggle to have math calculations. Okay, you can give them a calculator, but maybe there's something else they need to have as well. So how can we help the child with that disability learn and be able to academically grow? So that's where that comes from. We also need to know about data and other information that aids the ARD committee to determine what is achievable for that particular child over the next year. So again, this is individualized. We can't compare children. Now you can try to compare a disabled child to a non-disabled child, but again, those are two separate children. So it's very individualized. And let's say Johnny can achieve certain math calculations in a shorter period of time than Sally. Okay, Sally can't achieve calculations as quickly, so she may need longer time. So again, having all that information that can be confusing to parents, we need to spend time with parents and guardians and say, this is what we're talking about. And students, if they are required to be in ARD meetings, but maybe they're getting a little bit confused about, oh my goodness, they're talking about this and this and this. I have no idea what's going on. Teach your children to be advocates for themselves and to speak up and say, that's not what I remember, or I remember doing this. This was fun. This was easier for me to learn. That is important data that goes into that PLAAFP statement. So we collect a lot of it. We should be collecting a lot of it. Not one sentence for a PLAAFP statement. No, no, no. Now, page 14. I've said a lot of information, and some of you may not understand everything, and that's okay. There's a lot of great people. Our friends at Partners Resource Network is going to help us. Teachers are going to help us understand this. On page 14, when it talks about the IEP, I've talked about academic achievement and I've talked about functional performance. There's different considerations from IDEA, so I made sure that I put that link there for you all. If you looked in the document online and you were to click on that must consider, that pops open from the federal government. So it's really good that they have what we call those hyperlinks and embedded links throughout. Again, I took this straight out from the Texas Sped Support Technical Assistance document because I couldn't say it any better. It's important to really understand those academic achievements. It could affect some of the functional. Maybe, again, if a student has a physical impairment, or maybe they have a traumatic brain injury, some of the things that they do functionally, they may need to master better. So that's something I've kind of gotten off track a little bit here. I'm going to start with functional. I'll start with functional and then go to academic. That functional performance, we want to get the data from people like physical therapists that come to the school, occupational therapists that come to the school. Maybe you have a child with a traumatic brain injury and they're working with counselors. I saw somebody from MHMR. That's awesome. So those counselors will be able to provide good information. Maybe there's certain things they're working on. That is good information for the PLAAFP statement. And then you can see, do we need a functional one? Well, my child just has dyslexia. They may not need a functional performance IEP goal an objective. So you want to take a look at that. Maybe a child on the autism spectrum needs some help with social skills. That's a functional performance. So that's important to know that your child may get one or the other or both. Academic achievement goals and functional performance goals. So all that comes together for the PLAAFP statement. I'm trying to think of what else. So you can see the differences there from academic to functional, and know that this is terminology that the schools will use. Academics, oh yeah, that's that stuff they're learning in those regular classes. Oh, functional. Well, do we need a functional IEP goal if they're in music class? Well, maybe. There's a lot of stuff that can happen in a music class. I always like to give examples of art classes. They could have easels and tables and chemicals. You know, students need to make sure that they are able to move about and function properly in those classes. All right. Now going back to page 14 and 15, delving more into those PLAAFP statements, looking at that data. I've kind of preached on it and I apologize. It's not limited to this list. It needs to be meaningful and accurate data. And what are those strengths? Okay, maybe they need a functional performance goal, but they also do well with certain functions. Maybe they're able to walk down the hall with a walker. Let's say you have a child with cerebral palsy and they need to have a walker and they're in elementary school. I keep thinking about elementary school, not secondary. So as they're walking down the hall, they do really well with their walker. But let's say something happened, it got left behind because somebody was walking with them and they don't have that walker. Well, in all classes, that's important to have that walker. So they walk great, and that's a strength that they have, but they need that walker. If they don't have it, they're not as successful. So that's just one idea to think about. When you're looking at what we call an FIE, that's the full individual evaluation. That is when the assessment person has done all their evaluation. You have what I call itinerant people. So people like physical therapists, occupational therapists, they come in, they do their assessments as well. All that data is being collected for that initial evaluation. But we also have to meet to talk about that reevaluation. And that typically happens every 3 years. What kind of testing do we need to have the child go through? And I like to use the example as a secondary student. If they are 17, 18 years old and it's time for a reevaluation, that child, that student, young adult can say, I don't want to go through this testing again. And you don't have to, but you have to all, I say you all agree. It's really the parent and the administrator that have to agree in those decisions. But that child can say, you know what, I don't want to go through this. That's a good example of when you might not want to do a reevaluation. Progress reports. How often are you getting them? Most schools use 6 weeks, but some schools use 9. What about information from parents and teachers? Oh, yeah, I've got several of these emails where mom and dad and I are communicating via email. We're going to bring this because, Mom, you told me about this one situation, and this is good information for us to consider because we've been working to try and figure out some things that we need for this student. That's good information. Observations. Maybe we have some people that are coming in, some outsiders that are noticing some things. Sometimes special education teachers or diagnosticians or behavior specialists are called in to do some observations. We're seeing these negative behaviors that are going on. Okay, so it's their job to go, what is happening beforehand? What is that antecedent? Oh, this is what happens when this happens. Okay, what's the consequence? So those observations are very important. Mom and dad, if you are seeing things like that at home, dad's doing certain things with the student and things are working well, mom tries it, doesn't work so well. What's going on there? That's good information. Work samples from home, that homework they bring. Anything in a portfolio, if a teacher has that portfolio, you typically hear that in the younger grades. What about intervention data? That is good to know. My child's struggling with reading and now they have to stay after school. It's not detention. I can't remember what it is. Well, maybe it's RTI or MTSS. That is response to intervention or multi-tiered support services. I have to remember the difference. MTSS has more behavior and mental health involved with it as opposed to RTI. But we're intervening to try and figure out what's going on with the student and their reading. That's one example. What about attendance? Well, we can identify a child who has been moving about. They haven't had a lot of good quality instruction, not a lot of access to that. So we need to consider that. Is this student struggling because they've missed a lot of school? Maybe they got sick. Maybe they're going through cancer treatment. Sometimes that happens to our kiddos. And is that affecting them? Does that mean they need specialized education? And any kind of assessments, and I know not everybody likes those, that awful A word, the assessments and testing, which we're gearing up for in the state of Texas. But screenings, any kind of things that are being done in the classroom, those things help us create that PLAAFP statement. And I'm trying to keep an eye on my time. I wanted to share this slide because the Progress Center is a great resource. And these are great tips for developing a PLAAFP statement. You want to address all the needs, but you also want to address those strengths as well. What kind of functioning issues are we having? Is it measurable? Can we say, oh, 4 out of 5 times they're able to do A, B, or C? We need to know that. Any kind of accommodations. Yeah, I'm the PE teacher, and I see if I do this, this accommodation for Johnny, then he's a lot more successful. So I need to do this. I can't think of a PE accommodation, but I always use specific learning disabilities and reading books, audiobooks as accommodation. Accommodation helps them gain access to the curriculum, whatever that curriculum looks like. A modification changes it, so we need to be careful with modifications. Does that mean we can't do it? No, we just want to remember we're changing that. And so there has to be a lot of criteria that goes along with that. What is our baseline statement when they started, and what is that annual goal? Also, it's important to know days and times of when certain things were done. If we're looking at data today in February of a school year, and we're looking at data that was done in September. Well, what happened? We've got a lot that's happened. What happened, before the holidays? Did we not test? The holidays, we had 2 weeks off, and then we've had snow, and then we've closed because of the flu. We need to know those types of things when things happen and get in the way of looking at good, clear data. But Progress Center is a great place. I also want to point out Partners Resource Network has a great handout. It's just 2 pages. You can download it. You can look at it online. I put the link in there because I think I forgot to embed but I know those that are assisting behind the scenes will be able to put that in there. I also wanted to put that QR code. That is right there on that handout. It's a great handout about how to understand the PLAAFP and what all goes into it. So take a look at that when you have a chance. So I also wanted to include research. I thought it was really good that a lot of professionals with the Council for Exceptional Children, they have some journals, and Teaching Exceptional Children, I believe is the name of the journal. I got 2 articles that I put at the end of the PowerPoint that you should have free access to. You should be able to look at that, whether it's in a journal, a library, online, anywhere. The researchers came together and they developed a worksheet. So in that document, it's a great worksheet. I looked at it and I'm like, take this to an art meeting and say, okay, what does this cognitive thing mean? I don't understand all this data and these numbers and words in here. What's that woodcock thing? Parents won't know a lot of that data. Maybe they do. Maybe they're like me and research and find out. But what are these different components to help our parents understand the different components of it? So they developed this worksheet, Harmon and that group of researchers, and they put it in this article. A multidisciplinary team should come together with all their data and document on that worksheet. Should be great notes. Now, that's not the IEP that I talked about, but these are the notes. These are things to come up with. How are we going to write the PLAAFP statement? And there should be somebody that's writing that, but bring components of it to help with that. And we need to have parent input. So executive functioning, are they organized at home? Can they put their dirty clothes in the laundry basket? Sometimes they can't. The group will compile this into a statement, and at the least it should be several sentences, if not several paragraphs. It should be pretty big. It should be detailed, depending on the student and their disability. The strengths should come first. The areas of need should come next. And then any relevant data that will help back up. This is where that student is struggling. This is where this student is excelling. And so that comes together to be a part of this. So I would encourage you to look through that article. It's okay if you don't read it. It's in somewhat layman's terms, so it should be somewhat easy to understand. But you want to look at social skills, emotional things. Maybe they're not talking about things at school, but at home they break down. We want to know that. What about transition? What are they going to do when they grow up? Those are important details to put in here. I also want to tie this back to the Supreme Court ruling in the Andrew versus Douglas County. And that talked about free, appropriate public education. So I mentioned that earlier in the webinar. And this court ruling talked about what is appropriate and something more than minimal progress. That IEP cannot be, Johnny can name all days of the week, by the end of the month. That's not good data. Let's say that he will name, identify, understand, and be able to write a story, something better than just the minimal progress. So because the Andrew family, they had some issues with the school, and the school was giving them the bare minimum. Again, that R word, that rigor, it's okay to push the bar just a little bit, but not go overboard. Also, the authors that use the PLAAFP statement, they started out with a little small paragraph. It was insufficient. And through this article and their research, they demonstrated that using a worksheet, such as the one they developed, gives far better information about the students with the data to help develop appropriate IEP goals. So you can look at that time frame, that criteria, that behavior, all the things that come together to make those IEP goals will be more appropriate. So thank you for that. Sometimes people are a little afraid of that. Let me see here. Here's some resources. So take a look. SPED Tex, Texas SPED support. That third one is about the legal framework. I didn't really go into detail, but these are great resources you can look at. And let me see here. Here are the articles that I referenced, so you'll have access to that. And thank you. I tried to get done in enough time to leave questions and answers, but that's what I have. And let me stop sharing and see what kind of questions and answers we have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Denham. What fantastic information. As a reminder, if you're joining us on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us on Facebook today, please put it in the comments. So we have a number of questions.
Perfect, yes.
Oh, great question. A parent wanted to know who all is part of the ARD committee.
Okay, well, it can be, and I appreciate that about TA updating documents. Yes, they are. So the ARD committee, you have parents or guardians, students as appropriate, and I believe in the state of Texas, it's 14 that they need to be there. I had my daughter in 5th grade. I had her come and I was teaching her advocacy skills. You want special ed, at least one special ed teacher and at least one general education teacher. But all the teachers working with the child, they need to compile that data and be able to give it to the one teacher representing. You need an administrator, you need an assessment person, such as an educational diagnostician or licensed school psychologist. And then you may have other people. Typically, you don't have doctors there, but they provide reports. You may have reports from physical therapy, occupational therapy. So there's a variety of people. It can be small and it can be big. The important thing is to know parent and administrator must agree.
Thank you for that. A great question. If a student has no functional performance needs, should that be included in the present levels as strengths, or should it not be included at all?
Oh, I would include it because then you can go back and say, they're really good. They're able to move about and function physically in all their environments. So name those strengths. They play sports. They, work with a special coach, or, they play in Special Olympics, so maybe they don't need that functional performance goal. So I would put it in there as a positive and list those strengths. And then there's no need for a functional goal at this time. Good question.
So I have a parent that asks, how many years should we be seeing the same goals year after year in the IEP?
No, there should be new goals every year. And if it's the same goal over and over, uh, and I have no filter on my face. I just realized that. No, don't do that. You need to change them up and you need to look at, they've mastered this. The goal is for the student to master their goals. And if they're not mastering them, something's wrong. We need to look at the data again and go, okay, what is the disability that is affecting their performance at school, academically, functionally, and what can we do better? And it's okay. I'm sorry. I got to go back to art. We need to have an art meeting. I'm not seeing any progress here. So they should be different and change every year.
Absolutely. Got a couple of questions about kind of the difference between a progress report and IEP progress report. So can you kind of talk a little bit about the difference between like your regular grade report card versus the IEP progress reports?
Sure. A grade report card, you're just seeing numbers and subjects on there and who the teachers are. And you don't really have any other information. But a progress report from the special education teacher, they should be collecting that data. I used to send out, I made my own form and I would send it to all the teachers of little Johnny and then all the teachers of Sally. And I'd send that information out. So in that progress report, I can attach it to the grade report. And so that would go out every 3 weeks. And then certain systems, when I was teaching in public ed, ESPED was the program we were using. A lot of schools are using different programs now, like Embrace is one of them. I don't know all of them, but they have things where it prints out that progress for them. So they have like a computer system that can print those out. So that may look a little bit different in the 6 weeks or the 9 week term as opposed to the 3 week. Did that help? I hope.
That does. Thank you for that. So an interesting question. If you're having an ARD meeting and it gets recessed and it keeps continuing before it's finalized, what day will they use when looking at the 1 year out to reevaluate? Is it going to be that initial meeting or that last meeting?
Ooh, I that is a very good question. And my first thought is that, and there could be experts that could answer this a lot better. I would say it's when things were finalized, but it's always good to have that clarification. So there's times that we didn't quite meet the timeline in a timely manner in a year. And so that kind of pushed out that annual R date. But when you are working through it, I would say when it's finalized, you want a year from that point. That's what
Excellent.
I
Thank
would say. But that's a very good question.
you. It is. It's interesting. All right. So a parent said that their teacher has asked for their input in developing goals for their child. Is there a resource where they could look to get some examples of a well-written goal or how to work on writing goals?
Sure. A lot of the resources I mentioned today, Partners Resource Network has great. I use their information in my class. So if I can use it in my class, I know a parent could use it too. And again, don't be afraid of looking at TEA's website. It is kind of cumbersome, but it is good. It has a lot of good information there. But also look at the Texas Legal Framework, which is one of TEA's. They work with Region 18 and they put this together. So they might have some things, and I know that they have a whole page of resources. Rights law, several of the resources that I listed, those are great for parents. Understood.org is a great parent advocacy organization. So that's another one. Oh, thank you for putting that in there. That legal framework, I always tell Gen Ed teachers, that's what we call them, Gen Ed. We're SPED and Gen Ed. I always tell the general education teachers, bookmark it. Because if a parent asks you a question, you need to know where to point them. That's where you're going to find your procedural safeguards. That's where you're going to find what is this ARD process. So there's a lot of great resources. And remember, you don't have to write the goals, but you want to look at time frame. Can my child do this in a certain time frame? That's too much. They lose attention. I've got to shorten it. That kind of information is what's important in writing those goals. So you probably have more resources than what you think, but there's a lot of great resources out there. Yes.
All right. We're going to have one final question
Okay.
as we're wrapping up because we're right at 1:15. So somebody asked, would a student's need for feeding therapy fall under a functional performance need?
I would say yes. And so probably you're going to have that child will work with an occupational therapist and probably also speech therapist because speech can help with that feeding as well. So I would say that those are more functional. Um, and maybe there's other things you move that functional goal to, maybe they needed a weighted spoon or fork to be able to feed. And so they're learning that. And then you need to transfer that to some kind of writing instrument, whether it's a pen or a pencil or a marker or something to get them to write. Then that would become an academic goal. So I would say it would start as a functional goal. That's a very good question. Y'all had very great questions today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, we're going to wrap up there. If your question was not answered, please reach out to us. We would love to have an opportunity to share and answer questions with you. I'm going to share my screen one more time as we're wrapping up. And once again, Dr. Denham, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wealth of information with us. We appreciate it, and I hope that all of you learned as much as we did. So again, thank you. And for all of you that joined us, thank you. We are recording today's webinar. The recording will be available on our website at prntexas.org as well as our Facebook page. And a reminder, if you are needing a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, you will be receiving an email to thank you for attending the webinar. If you follow the link in that email, you can get your certificate of attendance. We have some other great webinars lined up for the spring. Coming up on March 25th, we have Calm in the Storm, Strategies for Parents to Manage Emotions at ARD Meetings with Dr. Malvika Bell from the University of Texas at San Antonio. And we have coming up on April 8th, Navigating a Manifestation Determination and Review meeting with Holly Martinez with Disability Rights Texas. Then coming up on Tuesday, May 6th, we have a brand new perspective on social skills training with Brandy Timmons. And we're going to wrap up our spring lineup of webinars with a review of the special education issues before the 89th Texas Legislature with Stephen Alamon with Disability Rights Texas. That is on Tuesday, June 17th. So please join us for those webinars. You can register for any of those on our website, again, at prntexas.org. On the screen now is information for our Director of Statewide Services, Christina, our support specialist, Chelsea, and myself. Please check out our website again at prntexas.org for information on upcoming webinars and the events in your local regions, as well as lots of information for parents. And like and follow us on Facebook at PRN Texas. Thank you again for joining us. Dr. Denham, thank you. It was such a pleasure having you join us today. Hope you stay warm over these next few days that we're having.
Thank you so much. And wow, what great webinars. Dr. Bell is one of my favorite friends and colleagues. That's going to be awesome. I'm going to have to get on and hear what she has to say. But thank you for the opportunity. Let me know how I can help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Denham, and thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful day.